All right.
Sorry.
Ready? Okay. Good evening. This is the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for the Village of Vernon Hills. We need to start with a roll call.
Chairman Morris.
Here.
Mr. Ballou.
Present.
Ms. Cotton.
Here.
Mr. Hesner.
Here.
Mr. Heidner.
Here.
Ms. Zhao.
Here.
Mr. Grog.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay. This evening, we have no public hearings, development reviews, but we have two items for discussion. First is the comprehensive land use plan update number 2, which is in our packet, and I understand Al is also here to answer any questions we have with respect to it. Did you take the microphone over by you?
He's got it.
Because you know that's the one rule we have. Okay. You wanna?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In your packet is a summary memo that reviews the 7 points that we had addressed. Al had worked with his staff with regards to putting together the changes that you had requested at the previous meeting. I think they're pretty straightforward. We made some adjustments to the maps as requested. We made some adjustments to the census information as requested. We added the widening of Route 45 and adding Evergreen as a collector road. Forgive me, I'm working from the bottom of the memo upwards. The transportation section, we added comments with regards to the bicycle and pedestrian plan, and also monitoring routes 60 and 21 for possible road expansion. We clarified some future development within the TIF district, and with regards to that, that dealt primarily with the south side of Route 45, the Darby property, the little shopping center on the south side of the road, and the possibility of doing facade renovations and changes on that. That's page 14. And also we added some language in there with regards to mixed-use opportunities, transportation-oriented type development related to the metro station. Again, the triangular piece of property the village owns all but 2 parcels of that, actually 3 parcels of that. And it's an idea for the future if somebody wants to approach us to put together a project at that location. We also added guidelines, page 14, we added guidelines with regards to the northeast corner of Route 60 and Milwaukee Avenue. Again, the comment there was basically remembering that this is a very special corner, and that what we did was put together some guidelines that tried to address this idea of if a mixed-use type development came forth, here are the guidelines that we would ask folks to follow with a mixture of commercial and residential uses on that property. And those are the 8 points that you'll see in your document for that location. And then finally, one thing that I don't believe was in the last plan, but we added a future land use map that's in here, page 11 in the document. We added this, and there's the importance of this map really comes about if in fact we get into a situation where either we're annexing property or we're objecting to a change in land use or change in zoning requested in the county. And what we're suggesting is that this land use map be included as a part of our plan, that it reflects what the county's framework plan is, and it be used as a tool to protect our boundaries and or adjacent land uses in the future if we ever, or if someone ever approached an adjacent community or someone wanted to work within the county for a rezoning a property that we felt was inappropriate to our adjacent boundaries. And that's primarily the feature that the reason for this map, and why you see the village in one solid color, and then these individual parcels are around the perimeter of it being in different colors related to the various land uses which we're suggesting. So I would also comment, we have a couple of other cleanup matters in here. one of which is on the land use plan, that I've noticed a couple of things. There's a punctuation issue with regards to the map that we'll clean up. I would also note that there's a land use question that we want to clean up on that map that included some open space. For instance, the two pods that are adjacent to the commercial properties up in Greg's Landing, the Oakmont, for instance, which is adjacent to Mariano's and Lowe's. If you remember, there's a large detention pond and open space adjacent to that. What I'd like to do is, on the map, designate those open spaces or green spaces on the map instead of showing them as single-family attached or detached uses. And there's a couple of parcels like that. There's a vacant parcel adjacent to the on the border in the Carasotis development. It's identified as open space. It really should be commercial because it is a buildable lot that was designated at one time for a restaurant. If you remember, as a part of the Carasotis PUD that went along with the theater and the 3 restaurants, we still have one vacant lot down there. So we're going to make an adjustment there. And then the other change, again on the land use map, would be down in the TIF district. There's a parcel that is owned by the College of Lake County that is, it should have been identified as institutional, governmental or institutional use, and what I'd like to do is change that color back to reflect CLC's ownership and ultimately CLC's development of that property. So I guess with that, with those changes and the like, and any others that you would propose, what I'm suggesting tonight is that if you're comfortable with the document as you see, that you allow us to go ahead and schedule a public hearing on the amendments and schedule that hearing for the middle of April. I think it's April 18th, from what I remember. Schedule it for April 18th, and we'll do the necessary advertising and post the document on the website and give plenty of time for people to take a look at it, and then we'll have the public hearing to recommend adoption of the document as you see. So with that, Al, I don't know if you have any other comments you want to add, if I missed anything, or.
Oh, the future land use map, the previous one we had did not have all the parcel lines on it.
Yep.
And we're still reviewing some of that. As to say, John has noticed some, and we're still checking on individual parcels, because it definitely changed things when we started looking at it, when it actually had parcel lines versus just a general area. So we'll still be making some refinements on that.
I think the only other thought is we need to do a little bit better the graphic that you see with the pie diagram in your booklet. I got to adjust this a little bit and do a little bit more with the cleanup on this document, so you'll see a better pie the next time. Not going to Baker Square, but you'll see a better pie diagram in your packet at the next meeting. So. With that, I can answer any questions or any other further direction from the commission.
Right? Yeah, on, it's called the Comprehensive Plan 2012 Landmark Map.
Yep.
And actually, it's showing business parks and that sort of thing. It's listing as a business park the residential portion of Aspen Point.
Okay, good.
And then also, down in the right-hand corner, the shopping center, which I think you were referring to as being suggested that they refurbish it, is not even listed as a commercial center.
Yeah, that one, it doesn't have a name, and that's primarily why we didn't show it there. I guess it's technically part of the town center, but we didn't do anything to it, so it's a good point. We'll figure something out there.
Okay.
Just a point of clarification. Is Indian Creek, on the future land use map,
Yep,
is Indian Creek unincorporated?
no, it's
No,
a
they are?
actual village.
Okay.
It's a place.
Now, what is that unincorporated section right by Indian Creek? I'm trying to figure that one out.
Show me.
On the track?
Can you tell us what page you're on?
11, the future land use
Future
map?
land use.
Here,
Along the tracks.
along the tracks?
There's sliver along the tracks.
Sliver.
I'm missing. Oh, that's just an area that was not annexed as whenever we crossed the tracks. So I'm surprised it's actually not included, so.
Yeah.
We'll check it again just to make sure, but sometimes portions of railroads didn't get annexed into either community, so,
It just,
yeah,
it looks kind of
I know.
out of place.
And while we're on that map, just a question.
Mhm.
Purple area along Route, I think that's Route 60. Oh, no, never mind,
It's railroad,
The railroad.
yeah.
it's part of the EJ&E. You know what, we'll see if we can't put a couple of letters on there, EJ&E and CN.
Go back to the landmark map.
Uh-huh.
That Apple Hill Lane, that's not incorporated in any village either?
Correct.
I have an objection.
It's not in Lincolnshire or anything.
You don't want something to be landmark?
Okay. Is that all you got, Jim?
No, I did have some more.
Okay. Do you want to let Mr. Baloo butt in and while he's objecting?
He might forget it, he's ancient.
Mr. Baloo?
It's
Okay.
senility.
Go ahead.
On the landmark map,
Uh-huh.
is there a reason we're so prominently displaying the YMCA?
What's that?
Why is the YMCA so prominently displayed in the landmark map?
It's a symbol, I guess.
It just seems to jump out at us. We didn't put that much effort into our schools or
Lifetime Fitness.
our buildings or anything else. It just seemed,
I think what they did, it's a graphic representation that, I mean, I can tone it down if you'd like.
either that or tone some other things up, you know.
Okay.
On page 6, you added comment number 17, explore the possibility of establishing boundary agreements with the village of Buffalo Grove and Lincolnshire concerning the southern limits of the village and appropriate land uses for the area.
What is the objective there?
To establish what the ultimate annexation boundaries would be for each of the communities. I mean, sometimes communities get into land grabs. You know, they try to reach out and then they try to put a land use in that they as a community say, that's great for us because it's away from us. We as a community would say, nah, we don't, that's not part of our land use pattern. So what you're trying to do is establish where they would annex to and where we would annex to. That's really the intent. It just provides us protection.
And on land use map.
Okay.
My question is, the area that's the Oaks, I think your coloring indicates it's a commercial, small retail orientated?
That's the former Kelly's Day Camp, correct? Is that what you're talking?
Yes.
Okay.
That's what I'm talking about.
That, I think, was a carryover from the last plan. I'll check that. Because right now, it actually should be consistent with the Corporate Woods. So,
Right, that's what I thought.
yep.
So
Okay.
it would be
I
consistent.
think we ought to get
So it should be purple.
So it should be purple,
Fire department has disappeared.
Now, I will tell you that we are,
but there was language in that last time that we discussed about the not excluding potential residential.
right, and it's still there. It's still there, and in fact, that proposal is still alive. So that's why it's still a possible residential project on that line, on that site.
Can't make up the mind.
Then on the library district, last time we discussed the misspelling of Fremont, and they changed the correct spelling to an incorrect spelling, and so now it's spelled wrong in both places. Both in the legend and on the map itself.
Well, at least they're consistent.
Yeah. It was consistent now, but consistently wrong.
Doggone it. We will get that right. I promise you that.
And then on page 26, number 15,
I'm sorry, page 6?
26?
26, I got it, okay.
Number 15. I think that should probably all be stricken now, right? Unless we're going to put a road through the library.
Be creative.
Correct.
I'm not sure I understand.
I mean, I will tell you that there is an easement set up across the Victory Center that would allow access from Atrium to Aspen. We own the property on the other side, south of the library, that would allow a connection to be created in one form or another.
South of the library?
Correct,
The Park District doesn't own that?
correct.
Correct, they don't?
They do not. So we do have access via an easement across actually the
that
south
something new?
driveway.
I don't remember that when we discussed the library.
Oh, yeah, because if you remember, the village owned the parcel that the library is located on. And when we subdivided it into 3 parcels, 2 of the parcels went to the library, the 3rd parcel remained with us.
Okay, all right.
That's why this is still in here.
In here, okay. My only comment on the addition of number 17, seems like it was worded stronger as far as the widening of Route 60. And I think 21 should have equally strengthened the verbiage. Sounds like you're going to look at the traffic and then decide.
Also a couple of typos.
Spelling error.
Yeah.
And that in 17?
Yeah, the first line functionality is spelled wrong.
And the last line, improvements, is spelled wrong.
Which one, I'm sorry?
Functionality.
Functionality?
Then the first line.
Yeah.
And then improvement.
I wish I had candy. I could just start throwing to people and get them right.
I wish you had spell check.
Yeah. I do too.
Yeah, we did. Can I ask something about that?
Hmm?
Do we really want a continuous 6-lane road down 60?
You mean from 41 to 83?
Right, and then in light of that, 21 obviously needs improvement, but probably really needs more improvement north of us, doesn't it, than through the village? And then 45, which just has a line on item 22 is probably one that's critically undersized.
Right, maybe 45 obviously is under study right now.
Right.
That was addressed somewhere else in here too, wasn't it?
45?
Yeah.
I think it's mentioned, yeah, it's up.
I thought
Right.
it was somewhere else.
Right.
I mean, it's under study right now, and I think there's a recognition that it will ultimately get widened whenever somebody comes up with some money to do it. It's about a $70 million project now. With regards to 60, you know, part of it is the fact that the right-of-way is there for the most part, and I think there's a recognition that if the traffic gets bad enough through there, the question will be is, should it be widened? I think the plan, you know, anticipates that at some point it will have to be done. If you want to soften this language a little bit, or say something that, you know.
I guess, now that you say the right-of-ways, I guess I didn't remember that, but if the right-of-way was utilized along 60 to make it I assume when you say a 6-lane, you're talking about 6-lane, then turn lanes also?
Correct.
Is this,
What happens to all the buffering? Does it all go away, basically?
Well, a lot of it goes away,
And then we have,
or it gets cut down significantly.
when you say the right-of-way is available, is that through this entire length or just through our, through Vernon Hills?
Through our portion of it. I don't think it's available west or east of the village limits, for instance. So there's right-of-way acquisition that would have to be done there, so. But we have a majority of it already acquired here. I mean, we could soften the language if you wanted to.
I guess
you
on
know.
one level, you know, from my standpoint, if the traffic need was there for a 6-lane cross-section with turn lanes, I really wouldn't have an adverse comment on it because there's no really good east-west access across the county there.
Right.
However, it seems to me that if we can recognize that that might be a traffic need and somehow needs to be balanced with what we've tried very hard over the years to maintain are these buffers,
Yep.
rather than just lose them. I don't know how you balance it exactly, but
Yeah, the problem, I know what you're saying, and I agree with what you say. The problem is that if you maintain those buffers, it's kind of like what they're talking about 53. What it means is that the footprint gets wider.
Right.
You could maintain the boulevards that are in the middle, but the footprint of the road gets wider and pushes onto the adjacent property. So, I mean, we can try to put some language in here that says while balancing the need for buffering or green addition, you know, maintaining as much green space as possible.
anything else? Jim? Anybody?
Just one other thing, John, on that mark map.
Yep.
On the key, we have fire stations listed, but Deer Path Drive is covering up one of the fire stations.
It's
The written part of it,
got it.
so you can't really see where it was. Might want to move
Okay.
Deer Path.
Yeah, fire station's missing.
Well, you didn't complain on the why that Lakeview Parkway was covering up the,
That's because I didn't want
The
you to
Y
see the
symbol.
Y. So I was happy with Lakeview.
oh, we can't discriminate there, John.
I understand.
Right here.
Yeah. So many maps.
So where it says Deer Path Drive.
Right under the P.
It's kind of hiding under.
Is it up here?
It's gone, yes.
It's on the backside.
Got it.
You turn on it every day.
I do. Exactly right. Okay.
Anybody else?
One last thing,
Jerry?
I don't know if this is proper, but are you gonna change the numbering so it's not page 31 of 30?
Well, sure.
No, that's
Yeah, this is a draft
That's the
document. So,
secret
yeah,
page.
we will, what we'll do is when we go to the public hearing, this will all be cleaned up. You won't see any of the edits, other than we probably will underline what's shown as changes in here so that anybody who's looking out in with the, as a resident or whatever, can see what changes are being made, but yeah, it'll be all cleaned up, so. It'll be 35 of 30 or something. So, yep.
Can I ask it's not a comment, it's a question about this, and it's really, I guess, to both you, John, and you, Al. To the extent that we recognized when we saw this last time that the village is, God forbid, entering either middle age or maturity, it's no longer, young and vibrantly growing. With the limited amount of space that's left, that's available for building, or the requirement that if you build or develop, you have to knock something down to put something new up, is there a way to, I don't even know how to really articulate this, clarify that what we're looking for is not just, as a young village might, just to fill space, but we're looking more for something that is, and you can use all the tag words you want, higher quality, unique in character, all those type of good things that we try to talk about here, versus, we just want another, storefront filled up, or we just want another housing development put there. Because we're at a different stage in our life cycle. Now, I know that's not technically the land use itself, but it's kind of like the use of the land, or the available land.
Well, I think, I think a lot of the vacant land that's remaining is already identified via annexation agreements for a specific type of usage, whether it's the commercial properties up at Greg's Landing, the northeast corner. Those are the big three, basically, that remain as vacant parcels. And so it really comes down to a matter for new development that becomes, we know what's going to go there. It's just going to be depending on how it's put on the property. And we know what the quality will be because we'll dictate what the quality is of it. In terms of the reuse of buildings, which I think is some of what you're, either reuse or demolition and the like, I think the underlying land use plan establishes what we're looking for. And again, we have the ability through our development review process to dictate what the quality of those buildings are going forward. Now, if you'd like, we could probably add a couple of conditions in terms of reuse into the future under the land use. I think we've covered some of it.
What page, John?
5.
Okay.
You can look at new growth and redevelopment, that are energy efficient, including, clustering that talks about how you design on the property itself, consistent with the land use policies within this document, enhanced quality of living within the community, so there are some general guidelines that are set up here, and we can add additional, if you'd like, that talks about, ensuring the highest quality development, consistent with the character of the community, those types of things, if that's your thought. I don't know, Al.
You specify in number 12, that you're encouraging high-quality retail development.
Right.
But it's specifically for Milwaukee and 60.
Right.
But I think something like that might, expanding on that.
Right. And that's, that's where our principal commercial development is, so.
I think sometimes when you go too detailed on some of your descriptions, you limit the potential. So really maybe by expressing it as a, a need to be high quality, whatnot and so forth, maybe we could be heading in the wrong direction inadvertently. I think it really is up to the village and this commission, the village board, to really control the quality level that goes into the projects by maybe composition of materials, expression of design, things like that through the process, versus the words that go into a document like this.
Maybe we could add something similar to what we added in the housing section about actively encourage reinvestment in existing single-family neighborhoods. Maybe we can do something very similar to that with commercial. Actively encourage that they redevelop with a quality, you know, as you're saying, materials and what have you. So we could use, you know, use something similar to what we have in housing.
Does that work?
I think something like that.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, anybody else?
And along the lines of what Scott was saying about sometimes we get too specific in here, the same page, page 5.
Okay.
Point number 11, when you describe the development of Milwaukee and 60 in another section of the report, it say it may include residential usage. And here it says it sort of says it will include residential uses. So I'd like to see if we could change that verbiage there so that development, which may include residential uses as well, so it matches the part in the later part of the document.
Okay. Yeah, we can do that. Okay.
Okay, anybody else? Okay.
What we'll do then is we will finalize and clean up the document. We will schedule the public hearing for April 18th. Based on the polling that you all have done, everybody's available, which is great. Hope it continues that way. If you're not, let me know or let Lisa know. And we'll see, and maybe see Al one more time. Who knows? So, thank you. Al, you got anything else you want to add?
No.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. Great. Thank
Okay.
you.
I guess next on our agenda is the consideration of the proposed amendments to the zoning ordinance.
Okay. In your packet is a fairly comprehensive list of proposed changes that Mike Atkinson, the building commissioner, who's here tonight, and myself have worked through. A lot of these are just cleanup items, and what I thought we could do is run through it. Well, let me ask this. I mean, everybody's had a chance to look at this, and I guess first, if we could start out with any questions that you might have or anything like that, if that would be okay, and then we can go over, you know, individual things if you want and the like. And Mike and I are prepared to tag team this through. So,
On the residential driveway section, you're trying to make consistent some of the verbiage from, I think in one place it said 8 foot, and in another place it says 10 foot. We don't have any, do we have any existing 8 foot that would be affected by that change?
Not that I'm aware of. You know, an 8-foot driveway would be consistent with a one-car garage. But I'm not aware of a driveway that's less than 10 feet.
Okay,
This is really,
even in the older sections?
yeah, those are probably about anywhere between 10 and 12 feet wide.
Okay.
good night, Al.
All right.
In several places you refer to see figure such and such, but I didn't have any figure such and such in any of.
Because we didn't put any figures in yours.
It was on the screen earlier.
Yeah, we're going to redo a couple of them, and Mike, if you want to touch on that.
Yeah, are there any, is it by any chance figures 2, 3, or the figure referring to the fence? Because we do have that available for you tonight.
I think it's figures in general, right?
Oh, there we go.
Oh, in here?
Yeah,
Is
there's,
this the figure?
that's one of them.
Actually, this one said figure 14, the one I have in the circle, but.
Okay, well, we can, I actually have one copy here. We
Yes,
can also
what's
make,
about fences?
is it about fences? We have that for you then here, just a second if I can.
You may have to walk closer to it.
I don't know.
Oh, I know, but. Oh. I just wondered where he was pointing to.
Go down to the bottom, the lower left-hand corner with the
When you
mouse.
move the mouse. No,
There we go.
There we go.
3, 4. 14.
Yeah, there you go. So if you look at, in this one, if you look at the text of the code, it simply states that on a corner side yard, you can't be any closer to the street than the face of the building on the adjoining lot. But then when you go to the figure, you can see how the top figure is consistent with the text.
Do you have use the arrow on the mouse? I think you can. No, on the
The
mouse.
top picture is,
On the
this is
mouse.
no, because it would be,
Mike, use the mouse.
We can't see that.
Use the mouse and the arrow.
There you go.
That's it.
See it?
for here, the code is requiring for the fence that it be no closer to the street than the face of this building. So the figure's saying, no, this would not be permitted. Here, the fence on the corner side is no closer to the street than the face of this building, so that would be permitted. And this figure is consistent with the text that's in the code currently. What's not in the code is the situation where we have just a 2-lot block, where generally speaking, it's an exterior side of a house that's facing a 2-lot block, not the front face of the building. But the figure indicates that you can have the fence up to the property line and don't have to hold it back consistent with the adjoining property. What we're suggesting is that we change the text to be consistent with this figure, and that only on 2-lot blocks we permit the fence up to the property line. And it seems consistent with the way the code's been applied for many years, because we've run across fences that are 15 years old that it seems like the figure is what's been applied. So we see this as kind of a cleanup to be consistent with the way the code's been.
Yeah, I think there's several good examples along Deer Path.
Yeah.
If you drive, especially on the north end of Deer Path, where it's been applied like this, even though there's somewhat of an inconsistency in the ordinance. So,
So are we saying that the upper portion where it says no, that would still be no, or? are we
That's correct. What we're saying is we would change the text to represent exactly what's shown on those 2 figures there. So everywhere you see a no would still not be permitted, and everywhere where you see a yes would be permitted.
Mike, do you know of any conditions where, for instance, where it says yes, where that corner house is actually closer to the road than the house next door? And so if you were to go and continue the line of the house directly to the side there, it would actually be in front of the adjacent house?
Yes, like in this example, they show the house is in a perfect line and it looks all nice.
Right.
But the reality of it is, there are situations where the corner house is set further back from the street than the adjoining property. So is closer to the
Right.
street than the adjoining property. So their fence can't line up with the face of their house. It actually has to be set back in.
Okay, so
a
there
little.
would be no ability to gain relief for the corner house on that fence to come off of the corner of the house. It would have to be literally set back along that side elevation.
Correct, so it doesn't get, so that it's not located any closer to the street than the front face of the adjoining property. The only relief would be applying for a variation.
So do we have any, I guess, my guess is there's probably a couple of homes in probably Deer Path that maybe don't fit into these patterns that have existing fences.
probably.
And I guess my question is, if, fences get old, you want to replace them. Are
Right.
these people going to be penalized and all of a sudden have to shrink their yards?
Right.
Or are we going to grandfather them in?
How would we allow?
Well, if,
Replacements.
what we're recommending is that what was allowed in the past, which is, which shown as a figure, that allows more fences to be closer to the street on a corner side yard. So we're suggesting changing the text, which is more restrictive than what's shown on the figure. So we don't anticipate catching anyone in a non-conforming situation. We think that actually it'll just make it clearer what we've been, how we've been regulating fences for a number of years now.
Are you talking about the corner of Bedford and Deer
Yeah,
Street
yeah.
and Deer Path?
Yeah, that's one that jumps right out at me. I mean, they're right out to the sidewalk, those fences,
The white one?
and both sides.
And they're all like that. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah, those
a lot
guys,
of,
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, they pin them all the way out there, and I'm
Right.
not sure whether some of them even meet the criteria.
Right.
So, I mean,
There-
doesn't affect me, but I'm just, thinking about somebody that's had a fence
yeah,
for
it
God knows
wouldn't
how
be,
many years.
Sure.
to be
and all
fair,
this-
to make them move it in,
and
right,
all of
I
a
agree.
sudden, they go, well, the fence got blown down in the windstorm, but now you can't keep it there anymore.
Right.
So, just,
There may be, I mean,
and maybe there
It may
aren't,
happen.
but if there were, I was just
Right.
wondering.
I don't think we're gonna be able to deal with, if there are grandfathering situations that, by changing, if somebody has their fence blown down, or you could very well have to bring it into compliance, so.
But just to be clear, what we're recommending would not strengthen or make more restrictive the fence requirements.
Okay.
That's what we're attempting to
Alright.
do. There is a provision in the zoning code that says that if more than 50% of a non-conforming fence were to be destroyed, then you would have to make the whole fence comply. So if you had a portion of it damaged, you could still repair that portion until you exceed 50%, and then the whole fence has to be made to comply.
It'd be a heck of a storm, how about that?
I just,
Okay. I guess, any questions anybody has on the patio setback requirements on page 1? Private school, public and private schools, just to clean up. Basically, what we're trying to do is reflect existing conditions here. They have their own zoning classification, so. Yeah, we talked about the residential driveways. Maintenance of the parking lots on page 5. It's just, what we're basically saying is let's use the current code, let's not reference a specific code, so that it always keeps current. Village planner, that is a position that's established in the village code. It's vacant. I've been here 12-plus years now, and nobody's ever been appointed the village planner, so we're taking it out of the review process.
I thought that was you.
Well, I kind of am. I don't have the official title, so.
Okay.
So, automotive service or repair and service establishments, I don't know if can we spend a minute on that, and maybe Mike can walk through on that?
Currently, we have a definition for automobile service station and/or mini mart, and it goes on to describe something that's like an Ernie's
Nice.
or either of the mobile stations on Route 60. And that seems to serve those type of uses just fine, and that type of use would require a special use permit. What we don't have is a definition of automobile repair service establishment. That would be similar to the previous definition, which is an automobile service station mini mart, except it wouldn't have the mini mart and it wouldn't have fuel pumps. It would be something more like Star Auto,
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
NTB.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we have a Midas muffler, but Midas muffler, those type of uses really we don't specifically define, and so it's difficult for us to understand how to apply that use and what district they're permitted in. So what we're suggesting is to add an additional definition of automobile repair service establishment, which basically defines what you're familiar with Star Auto, Midas, NTB, those type of uses. And further, we're recommending that they be allowed as a special use in a B1 or a BP district.
How does that affect existing?
Well, they're existing established uses, so they would be allowed to remain.
Without a special use?
What if the National Tire and Battery turned into a Jiffy Lube?
Then the Jiffy Lube would be required to come before the board. What would happen is NTB is there, and currently they're there, and they don't require a special use permit. If the amendment were approved, and a similar use were to take over that's not NTB, or even if NTB were to propose an addition to their facility or something like that, then the new facility, or before NTB could do the addition, would be required to come before the Planning and Zoning Commission and request a special use permit.
Yeah, so it's not eliminating potential, it's just making a logical progression of review.
Right.
Okay.
Correct, and then it really kind of nails down how we should apply requirements for these type of uses.
Okay. Building setback line, pretty straightforward, I think. Drive-in establishment, Mike, you want to touch on this one real quick? You know, and then go right into the next one with the restaurant carryout?
Well, drive-in establishment, you know, watching a movie from your car, as we remember when we were younger, we don't anticipate getting that type of use, or a type of use where you drive in and you receive whatever services there are while you're in your car. So we're suggesting that it's an antiquated term that can be and definition that can be eliminated from the code. And that leads into the other one, which is restaurant carryout, fast food, and then drive-in, drive-through. Currently, we define and regulate restaurant, carryout, fast food, and drive-in as requiring a special use permit in a B1 zoning district. What we're suggesting is that carryout, which is an establishment that doesn't have a drive-through window, you go in, you get ready-to-consume food in disposable containers, and you'll walk out and eat it. There's no tables or a place where you can dine in. We're suggesting that use is similar to a restaurant and is a low-impact use because it doesn't have a drive-through window and could be changed to a permitted use within the B1 district. The same applies to fast food. Fast food is, again, ready-to-consume food, but there are tables at the restaurant, like it could be a Jamba Juice, Potbellies, those type of uses, but again, no drive-through window. We think this is similar to a typical restaurant in terms of its impact, and we believe it should be as a permitted use. That leads to the last one. We say drive-in. We're going to suggest changing that to drive-through, and that would be, you know, the McDonald's, the KFCs, or any other use that has a drive-through window. We believe that should remain as a special use permit because of, you know, unique conditions related to how they design the site, the stacking of vehicles, the amount of traffic that's created during peak hours like lunch and dinner. So we would recommend keeping a drive-through facility as a special use permit. That's a summary of that.
Just a question, if you go down into Wheeling by Bob Chin's, there's a large drive-in restaurant where you actually sit in the car and they bring it to you. It's a retro place. I can't...
Super Dog.
Super Dog. So does that mean if that, well, unlikely, but if that type of establishment came to Vernon Hills and wanted to open a location here, what would apply to them?
Well, I mean, that's a good point, and I've been to the original one, and I think in Des Plaines, and I mean, and it's not to say that a use like that could get more popular as time goes on. I mean, it would be hard to predict. It may be advisable to leave the definition of drive-in in. If no one ever comes with that type of use, no harm is done. But if someone were to propose a super dog type use, at least we would have regulations in place to apply.
I would leave it in for that reason, simply because if you see that place, it's something. I mean,
And Sonic.
Sonic.
yeah, that's the other one I was thinking
Getting more
of.
aggressive.
Yeah,
Dog and Suds.
there you go. So I mean, if we go to the retro things, that might be. So I would, my recommendation would be leave it in because it doesn't hurt. So.
Okay.
Okay. J, permitted obstructions in the rear yard, any questions? K, accessory buildings. I just want to limit the number. L, building site review. All we're doing is just making sure that they understand, you guys are not only looking at site plans, but you're also looking at architectural, and then what's involved with looking at that. So it's more of a clarification. We talked about the fences. N, financial institutions, the temporary trailers, we're taking them out. We can handle them under the building site review process if need be. I don't think that we'll ever see a bank in a trailer again. Because as the Honorable Chairman has said, we are a maturing community now, and maturing communities don't live in trailers.
And we have a bank on every block.
There you go, exactly.
Are we a mature community?
The more mature we get, the more banks they're gonna be.
Item O, awnings and canopies. What we did was we split the definition here. Awning is traditionally what you see in your house or a business. The canopy now is a freestanding or structure for all intents and purposes, similar to a canopy above a gasoline station, the gas islands, et cetera.
I have a question on that one.
Go ahead.
On the amended for awning, where it says a roof-like cover, retractable or fixed, that projects from the wall. I think you should say wall, comma, or over a door, entrance, or window. If you say wall of a
Okay.
because it may be on an elevation and not over a door, entrance, or window, just because the module works that way.
Yeah.
Couldn't you just say projects from a building? Because that would cover wherever it came out of the building.
You could?
I mean, that would cover the door, the window.
That simplifies the whole statement.
Right.
Do we allow entry awnings?
Yes, we do.
The ones that, they may come out 20 feet?
Yep.
I think it says here that it limits the projection.
So that's why I'm wondering, based on
But
that
I think
definition.
It says 3 feet.
Well, but I think, I guess the question winds up being is, does that transition into a canopy?
It does, because it falls into
Right.
the definition of what a canopy is, as far as wholly or partially supported by columns, poles, or braces.
Right. Okay, then,
You know what, we'll take a look at that and see if we can adjust it a little bit.
I was looking something up real quick, but in terms of the awnings, were we still on the discussion about, do we need to limit it over doors and windows? Okay. We have, if we allowed it across the whole front of the house, I think what we would end up having is something that's close to an unenclosed porch, which we permit as a permitted obstruction in a front yard with certain restrictions as far as how far out it can be and such. So I think we have unenclosed porches, and that's a permitted obstruction with specific requirements. Then we have awnings, which is, a retractable type structure that's typically just over, it's connected to a wall, and typically just over a door or an entry. And really, I'm picturing something like a decorative canvas type awning or something like that. And then, so we're recommending also then creating canopy, which is a detached structure, which applies to gas stations. And the key is, when you look at our recommendation, is that for permitted obstructions, which is 4.6.8.1, we would strike out canopy, which is typical for gas stations because it's detached, but leave in only awnings. So the canvas, decorative type structure can remain as a permitted obstruction, but canopies, which are typical, which are separate from the building, would not qualify for that obstruction and would be required to meet the setbacks. So if we get a new gas station with a big canopy, we know they're not permitted to have an obstruction. They have to meet the required setbacks.
And what has been asked is, can we tweak this a little bit to allow for an entrance canopy? So if you want to extend 8 or 10 feet out, from a doorway to,
Rust-Oleum,
exactly like a Rust-Oleum, like Rust-Oleum used to have.
used to have, but that would be what.
Looks
Yeah.
nice now.
But that's what I'm talking about, something like that.
Yeah, it looks
We
really
can,
good.
we'll make some adjustments.
Didn't we permit a canopy under the senior building in the front?
Um,
Like a porte cochere?
yeah, it is a porte cochere, right.
So that's
And it's connected to the building,
but this has to be connected to the ground, according to this definition.
and it is.
But what if you just had one that just projected off the building? Like the building across the street from me downtown? It must go up 20 to 30 feet, but it's just connected straight off.
We'll take a look at that.
It's however,
Well, it's kind of like what we have out front here, without the
that's right.
poles.
Without the poles,
Without
right.
the vertical.
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Okay.
somehow connected to the building.
And then, so we could look at that, and then,
Yeah.
just to understand, would we want something that would be permitted to obstruct into a required setback, the covered entry, or is that something that maybe your thought is that it would be required to meet whatever those setbacks are?
Why don't we take a look at it? Because I think you have two items. One is a temporary condition, the covered awning or to the entry point. That's a temporary versus having an overhang or a covered entry that projects off the building. So we'll have to figure out some language on that, so.
Well, I think it gets complicated when you start looking at, retail uses or restaurants or, and if you get into multifamily, residential units, then it starts getting complicated as well. So I don't know how that's gonna work out.
Yeah, well, we could, dive into that a little deeper, and then, keeping an eye on how does that affect permitted obstructions? What,
Right.
what's needed for retail use or residential use? What's reasonable, and whether or not it would need to qualify for an obstruction.
Okay. Getting rid of the airport.
Really?
So we have to drag over here.
Is there a separate, like heliport type?
No,
Definition?
there is not. We do not, and I don't think you really want one. Because I don't think you really want a helipad here in town.
We considered one years ago.
I would believe that.
Yeah.
Hospitals, again, we don't anticipate seeing that. They're going to come here, but we would limit them to the R1 and the PIB district, again, public and institutional building, different district, that's where it's most appropriate. Item R, just to clean up, this language in here, talking about multiple buildings on a lot, being developed as a unit. I don't know what a unit is, so it's more of a unified development. Under item S, then there's a number of just additional clarifications. We don't have coffee shops in here defined yet. We allow them, flooring, jewelry stores, which would include, doing watch and clock repairs and those types of things again. And then schools, which are typically include martial arts studios and those and the like. So, item T, we are eliminating medical and motor hotels. I don't know if anybody knows what a medical hotel is. If you do, send me a definition because I've never seen one before. I have this big fat book of zoning definitions, and there is not a motor or a medical hotel or in there. So,
Wow.
Medical marijuana.
sorry, it's not California. Item U, entertainment clubs. This is a cleanup of the ordinance and a redefining of what actually should be entertainment uses. So what we did, as you know, entertainment clubs are allowed in the ordinance as special uses, both for non-alcohol and for serving of alcohol, but there's no definition per se in the ordinance itself. So what we did was suggest eliminating the definition, or eliminating entertainment club, period, and then creating a new definition for entertainment use that really kind of quantifies, movie theaters, concert or music halls, comedy acts, those types of things that would be permitted in here in the definition. And then from there, entertainment uses would become special uses, whether they serve alcohol or not, and that, again, that's consistent with the way that the ordinance is defined today. And then, again, it includes movie theaters, concerts, music, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the new definition that you see internally here.
I have a question on that one.
Mhm.
What about something like a whirly ball? Would that be defined as an entertainment?
It would be an entertainment use.
Because
Yes.
that doesn't fall into the classification of like a movie theater, concert, or musical. So I just,
We actually have, you could define it as an entertainment use. We also actually have a separate definition for, it's like adult recreation and training that we did specifically for that use, and it's defined in there. But it's, and that's what we would apply this to. And that's why you see under item W, it's actually considered an amusement with training values, et cetera, et cetera. And that's what you see in W there. Let me come to that, okay? Sorry, Jerry. Health clubs and health indoor day spas, again, we don't have definitions of either one of these, and we wanted to define both of them.
Question?
Uh-huh.
Well, just a comment on the health club, where you have a facility designed for a major purpose of, maybe you want to add the word improving physical fitness instead of just physical fitness.
Or improving physical wellness, because I don't know if you really want to delve into weight reduction, although some of us may need that. It you know, something more general
Sure.
in nature.
And then on that same one, I'm just a little confused on the last sentence. This shall not include a municipal or privately owned recreation building and or adult entertainment cabaret.
Well, we have separate categories for municipal or private recreation, like not-for-profits and those types of things, kind of like the Park District, for instance.
I understand the municipal part. I was a little confused on the private one. That was all.
I don't know. Let me look at that.
I think Glacier.
Well, that's a maybe it should be private not-for-profit or something like that.
Yeah, I think that would clarify just a little.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Looking forward to the adult entertainment cabaret, though.
Sorry, it's prohibited.
I just think it's a fun word, cabaret.
There's
It's
one in
an
Deerfield.
old-time word, it's a throwback.
Okay.
Go to the cabaret.
There's one in Deerfield.
And then the health and day spa, that's just another definition more than anything else. Again, we did not have that. W is the cleanup related to Whirly Ball. Again, I apologize. If you remember, we amended the ordinance to allow Whirly Ball as an amusement, and it had adult training associated with that. And there's two cleanups that we needed to do to that amendment to the ordinance. And one was, as you can see in the first one, exceptions. Actually, it should be conditions subject to the following. And then there were a series of 4 conditions, I believe. And one of the 4 was really bad language that didn't get clarified. So I think what you intended to say was, if the use is intended to be used by children, there's no alcohol to be served or provided in the facility. If it's intended for adult, then you can provide it. So
Do you want to say children or minors?
you could say either. I mean, children is very direct.
A 17-year-old or an 18-year-old isn't really a child, but
It depends.
Well, like Chuck E. Cheese, wouldn't that also be considered amusement? And they serve beer?
That's because the parents need it.
But don't they serve the Whirly Ball?
And Whirly Ball also serves
Yeah, I was gonna say,
regardless of if they have children there.
Right.
So I'm struggling with that as well.
So how does that cover that?
It doesn't.
It doesn't.
Right.
Right.
I gotta go back and look at it. I actually went back and listened to the tape and read the minutes and everything like that. And let me see let me work on this a little bit and see if I can come back to you on it.
It didn't work.
It didn't work for me either.
You just say primarily by children?
Go ahead.
Let me look at it. We may not need this, but I'll look at it. Okay. Parking is just an additional restriction we did not have. Why administration here? What this is in the section of the variations, it just clarifies basically what we've been doing for years, which is we typically grant variations as a part of special uses, and I wanted to make sure that was just clarified in here. And then, let's see, the next item down below this is the amendment to the public hearing notice requirement. What this basically does is say, for the notifications, you have to notify the property owners, and you also have to notify all the commercial occupants that are in possession or who are lessees within a shopping center, for instance, or the mall or whatever it is, within 250 feet of the premises of which the action sought. What it also does is it says if you have, for instance, an apartment building where you don't have a PIN number, if you're an occupant but you don't have a PIN number, you're not going to get notice on a public hearing application. If you do, for instance, in a condo building, you do have a PIN number, you do own that space, you will get notification based on that and the like. What this also does is it expands the area of notification by excluding public rights-of-way. So if you have Route 60, for instance, that's in the middle of your, the 250 feet, you got to exclude 150 feet of right-of-way, which means you're jumping all the way across the road and potentially going, you could go into Continental Executive Park if you go far enough. So it expands the area of notification for a public hearing. This is very typical with a lot of communities. In fact, we're one of the few that I didn't see that has not done this in the past. And then finally, it just clarifies that if you provide written notice to a trust or a bank that you satisfy the notification requirements, it just keeps somebody from coming back and objecting. And then finally, the newest item under item Z is automobile sales, and I'll let Mike walk you through on this one.
Okay, thank you. Well, currently, we permit automobile new car dealerships in a BP district, but we don't have a definition for this type of use. So first of all, we're recommending a definition, and the language is before you there for your reading pleasure. And then secondly, we're suggesting that maybe it might be appropriate to consider this as a special use in a B1 general business district as well. And so the definition would be added, and then also we're suggesting, in addition to the BP, let's add this as a special use into the B1 district. And then finally, if we do add it into the B1 district, there's a section in that section of the code that requires that all business activity and sales be conducted within a building. So we would need to add an exception for new car dealerships. And the language is there in your packet there, and that's kind of what we're trying to accomplish.
This is a significant change in the B1 classification. So we're putting this out there for your consideration. Is this an appropriate direction to go? Again, a number of the annexation agreements and the zoning provisions attached to those do allow for automobiles to be, or automobile dealerships to be sold on the properties or developed on the properties. So, but we wanted to throw this out there and get your sense and direction with regards to this.
I guess my question is, why are we limiting it to new cars only? I know that used cars are allowed only if they are sold in conjunction on a new car dealership, but why are we not allowing a used car dealership?
Well, I think the idea behind this is that we want to attract dealerships. You know, your brand, the major auto dealers and those types of things. We want that. We don't necessarily, we're not advocating that, you know, so-and-so's used car lot be established at a location and the like. So
like, we would be prohibiting an Enterprise or a Hertz from coming over and establishing a lot.
Correct.
What about, what's the name of that one up by Highway 50 in Wisconsin?
CarMax.
Right.
They sell
Something like
new.
that.
No, that's the only one that sells new. The one in Schaumburg doesn't sell new.
Right.
Yeah.
Or in Northbrook.
So we wouldn't want something like that,
That-
even though it looks like a new car dealership.
Well, but the only problem you run into is you see a lot of little used car
Right.
dealers that are not the size or magnitude of CarMax. It would be.
Yeah, I get the little ones.
Right.
I understand that part.
Yeah.
I was just thinking CarMax was the one that jumped out.
Yeah,
at me
CarMax
because it
does
was-
sell new cars in Kenosha. That's because I know the guy that runs that. That's an exception. That's not their norm.
And then I guess the only other point that I had was that when we talked about you're limited to a maximum of 3 square feet of outdoor display area, I guess what defines display area? Is that where the fence stops? Or I mean, are they gonna load up their used cars behind the fence and say, well, that's not really my display area, but I'm gonna go out there and show them to you anyway?
Well, I think part of this is A, is this appropriate? B, By special use, what we would do is say, these are the parameters in which you can develop, show us how you're gonna do this. You know, so it does provide some general guidance on this, but at the end of the day, we're still gonna work them over through the special use permit process.
Are those square footages based on somebody else's ordinance or anything?
Mike?
I mean, where did the 3-to-1 ratio?
It is based on information we found in other ordinances, and you have to forgive me, I forgot which ordinance I found it out of. But in doing research, we wanted to look for language that limited the sale of used cars as an accessory use to the sale of brand new cars. And so this is the language that we thought would work best. But we're certainly willing to hear your feedback on it. But our attempt was to keep used car sales as an accessory use.
And
Although,
Well, wouldn't that cut out the little used car dealer that you're worried about,
probably.
that requirement?
I only go back
That's the
to,
attempt, yeah.
I look at, you drive up down Car Alley there in Libertyville. I mean, most of those guys, primarily what's out on the road are their used cars.
Right.
It's not their new cars.
Right.
but they do have a lot of new cars.
They
on
do have a
the
lot of
lot,
new
though.
cars, but it's an ironic that they always display the used ones out front.
Well, first off, their showrooms are not very large.
Yeah,
Their indoor showrooms have what, a half dozen, maybe a dozen cars in them?
maybe,
And they probably have used cars, 10 times that.
right.
But I suppose as general guidelines, and if they come before us with requesting special use, I mean, it prevents them from opening a little tiny building with one new car in on this massive Kmart parking lot outside of it, filled with used cars.
Exactly, that would be permitted, and they couldn't even qualify to apply for a special use. But if a new car dealership wanted to come, they could apply for a special use, and during that process is when we could discuss the specifics of where would you put your new cars, where would you display your used cars, and what percentage of each are you proposing, and the plan commission would have an opportunity to act on that.
But what, I guess everybody looks for guidelines. I mean, they're gonna kind of want to know coming in what the requirements will be, or what they're limited to, I guess, is a better way to put it. And I don't know, just based on what I see in the new car business, I see an awful lot of used cars on their lots out front displayed prominently. So I don't know if you'd want to limit. I mean, we could say we got the Lexus dealership wants to roll into town, but he's going to want to have so many spots up front for all the used Cadillacs that get traded in or whatever. So
Well, and we're not, we wouldn't limit that. I mean, the issue here is new car dealership. We understand that there's a significant amount of used cars going through that. Again, as Jerry said and Jim, we just don't want we're not suggesting that having the used car lot only is the appropriate way to go.
And I don't necessarily agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
You can have some very high-end used car lots too.
Like the one up the north end of Mundelein
Oh, no,
that
not
sells
that one.
exotic cars,
Oh,
used cars.
I mean, and there's one in Palatine,
Mm-hmm.
Also, that's only sells higher end and classic cars.
Right.
So I don't necessarily think that restricting all used car dealers is a good thing either.
Mm-hmm. Understand.
If this helps, the definition was attempting to limit the number of used cars that can be displayed based on the number of new cars that are displayed, but it is an attempt to limit where you can display them. So, I mean, if a dealership, because of however they decide to do their marketing, wanted to display more used cars up at the front property line, that's fine, as long as overall in the lot, there's the higher percentage of the new cars versus the used cars per our definition. But, we could certainly look a little deeper into that definition too, but we weren't trying to regulate where you display your used cars versus new cars. We just wanted to make sure there was more new car activity going on there than used car activity.
Okay.
The other thing, when you look at like Pauley Honda in Libertyville, just because I'm kind of familiar with that, there's no way that where they display cars outside is a 3-to-1 ratio to what they display inside. They don't have a large
Right.
display room.
Right.
So, you know, under these guidelines, they would probably have a third or less of what they currently have.
I also agree that that those guidelines are much too restrictive. You look at, I mean, even something like a Highland Park Ford, Lincoln Mercury, or Lincoln, there's no more Mercury. They have a 500 car lot, but their showroom only has,
Libertyville Toyota is the same thing. I mean, their lot's huge because they have a lot of used, you're right. But they have a lot of new cars out there too.
Right.
right.
So,
Well, we can research that a little bit more.
Yeah, oh, definitely. Yeah, we'll look for a little more straightforward way of as far as display of cars outside, you know, the percentage of new cars versus used cars outside and not consider the size of the showroom.
and also storage of new cars on site. Again, for example, Pauley Honda has a fenced-in area in the back.
Right.
That really isn't a display area,
Right.
but that's where they keep some of their new cars.
Right.
So.
Yeah, we could address storage of cars as something other than display. Is that okay?
And as long as it is a special use, I still don't see why we are completely restricting used car dealerships. I mean, we can,
Right.
And, you
Yeah.
know, I tend to agree with that now because I think that there are some high-end. I think of the little gas stations from where I grew up that had used cars out front.
I don't think you can write an ordinance, though, that says that we will permit high-end or used cars that have a retail value of X and greater. You know, granted, would I like to see, just because it'd be fun to go look at, there's one in Hinsdale that sells used Ferraris, you know, and that's all they sell? Yes. But if somebody comes in and says, I'm also going to sell $1,000 to $2,000 cars, they're also a used car dealer. So I don't know if it's possible to write an ordinance like that without being economically discriminatory.
Aren't you doing that through your couldn't you do that through the square footage
No,
requirement?
because the square footage requirement only deals with new versus used.
I think the vehicles that we'd be looking at as far as being high-end cars, the exotics, you can give them a specific term. You know, it's like if you want to sell Porsches, you know, you have Porsches, but a Porsche dealer typically doesn't just sell new Porsches. They sell
Right.
Porsches that are, you know, many years old, but they look brand new.
Right.
You know, it's just I think maybe what you could do is look at it in terms of exotic cars or, you know, something special about them. Just give it some kind of special
Maybe we'll check in with
terminology.
or something like that.
Yeah, but you know, in terms of, what I want to see us put in truly used car lots, and not that I want to speak ill of Mundaline, like for instance, what's over like off Diamond Lake Road there, my answer would be no. I would not want to see it. Or what closed just recently on 83, just south of 45, no. You know, I wouldn't want to see that. If, however, we were able to get new car dealerships, I'm not quite sure that the inside versus the outside is actually a workable formula for a real dealer. Just by the very nature that cars are big, and you know they only display a limited number, and they have far more outside that are even used because people are trading if it's an active dealership. So I guess I'm in favor of having us address new car dealerships, and if we can address, though I'm not quite sure how we do it without being economically discriminatory, other sorts of used car dealerships, and that's fine.
Okay.
You know, from my standpoint.
I know that Palatine has an ordinance specifically for exotic used car dealerships. So that may be a place to look. Or I know they had one years back.
Well, and one thing that I think we have to understand is if this is an exotic car dealership, these cars aren't going to be outside.
First of all, they generally aren't, that's true.
They are not going to be outside.
Yeah.
Not one of them.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, then, I mean, we could look at Palatine's ordinance, see if they have something, look at other ordinances, and for exotic used car establishments, require that the cars be displayed only inside.
But see, you have to be careful.
But then it's the discriminatory point
Well,
that
you
you
also have to be very
make.
careful. What if you have in one of these zoning districts a big box that goes out of business? And someone says, great, now I've got this huge indoor parking lot that I can sell used cars in. Do we want that?
Yep, that's a good point.
I mean,
We actually thought about Kmart.
yeah, that's a good point.
Okay. Other comments? Our hope again is to put this back all together and bring it back to you guys on the 18th for a public hearing to amend the code, so.
Okay.
Thanks for your comments.
Now, did you want to defer the minutes because of the date, or just correct it and have? some
Yeah,
further-
you know what, if you could just, if you could approve it with the corrected,
Okay, the date on the minutes that we're looking at for January 18th, 2012, on each of the subsequent pages at the header, suggests that the meeting was on January 18th, 2011. So,
oops,
to the extent we know that's not true, we'd amend them to say 2012. And then does anyone have any other comments on it? People turned over page, Jim.
Page 16, the third from the bottom comment. She just couldn't hear me. Wasn't Hawthorne Hills? I guess, hasn't Hawthorne Hills removed fashion from their name is what it should say. It's not their number 29, whatever that means.
okay.
Okay. Anything else? So then we have a motion to approve with those two changes. We need a second.
Second.
Any discussion on that one? No? All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, we have one opposed. Or, okay. Anything else we need to know about this evening?
I think everybody knows Dominic's is closing as of April 3rd, so
Oh, no.
be aware of that. That's the word that we've gotten from their store. So Dominic's will be closing. We're working on some possible reuse of that building, so nothing I can talk to you about right now, but we're working on it. Working on a proposal for Walmart, so you'll be seeing something like that coming in the future, and I'm hoping that we'll hear something from Westfield soon about the theater expansion and the like.
What's
So
the proposal for Walmart?
I can't tell you.
Oh.
I'm just saying, keep your ears
Something.
open. So, yep, we're working with them, and they need to expand. So,
You gotta get that grocery store in there.
and then, let's see, yeah, like I said, Westfield is still working. And then we have a new restaurant going down into the TIF district called Real Urban Barbecue, or RUB.
Yay.
Coming out of Highland Park, very good barbecue place. The beer market someday will be open. Someday will be open. We continue to be hopeful. The Final Four, or the basketball tournament, starts officially tomorrow, and they're still not open. So, we're keeping our fingers crossed.
We did do final inspections today,
Hey, there's a good sign.
and there's some issues to work through, so it's,
As we expected.
we're getting there. Maybe by the Sweet 16 at the latest is what we're hoping.
This year's?
Yeah.
Yes, this year.
Okay.
So, that's what I got.
Then we're not back probably till the 18th?
Correct.
Okay.
I promise.
Okay, so we have a motion to adjourn. We need a second?
I'll second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed to that one? We're adjourned. Good night.